She tried to run him over, and he dove out of the way, and she drove through this shed, this like $1,000 shed that I just put in, and it just like exploded. If you're gonna invest in real estate, that's just gonna happen.
His name is Russ. He bought that mic, and now he's got a podcast show.
So you're selling off a bunch of properties right now.
Well, no, I mean, we had some flips. We had 5 flips all kind of get bottlenecked at the same time. Largely just kind of labor issues where like this one was delayed and, you know, like kind of bled into the beginning of the next project. Like I thought these were going to all be staggered well, and everything just sort of got stuck together. And then the market had slowed down significantly in the summer. So selling those, we have sold all of them now. We only have one left. And it's been slow there, so I might just refinance that one and keep it. I'm going to make a decision in the next few days on that because it'll cash flow. And then I can sell it later down the road when things kind of normalize a little bit more. I had a 6-unit in Orangeburg, an apartment building that I had for a little while. I did sell that a few months ago. I didn't really want to, but I was just having some like operational issues with it. Just being, you know, over an hour away and didn't really fit the sort of like plan with the other doors that I hold long term. So he did sell that. And that's actually been a little bit of a relief because every month was like sort of a surprise with that property. I never knew if it was going to be good or if it was going to be bad, you know? So I'm glad that one's kind of out of the portfolio now. It just makes things a little bit more certain.
Yeah. Yeah. When did you buy that portfolio?
That one I bought 2022, I think. And I sold it, I think like early this year.
Yeah.
So, you know, and it was performing. We had stabilized it a bit. It was doing a lot better. But I just wasn't really in love with it, and it had appreciated. So, you know, we did pretty well selling it. I think for me, for the stuff I'm going to hold, I like the assets that I have now, and I'm very familiar with the market that they're in. And I'm willing to save up longer and pay more of a premium for those because I just like the economics better of them.
So why weren't you in love with it? What was wrong with it?
My PM had infrastructure there, but it was just too much of a delay to get things done. Because it's very rural there. It's an hour away from Charleston, approximately an hour away from Columbia. There's not much. There's no metro area really there. There's a bunch of colleges there.
No, that's a strange place.
Yeah.
Any adventurous stories, crazy stories about tenants and
yeah, not, you know, I had a lot of single families prior to COVID that I self-managed. And when COVID hit, I started picking them off and I'd sell 2 or 3 of them at a time. And then I moved into apartment. Moving into apartment, a big part of that upgrade for me was that I got them managed. So I don't self-manage really any of my stuff anymore. When I self-managed, though, there were a lot of stories. Probably the craziest one I ever had was the first property I owned that I turned into a rental. I had some tenants there for a couple years, and I got really close with them. They were really sweet. This was a low-income area, so they would have trouble every now and then, and I would give them extensions, and every now and then I'd just knock some money off rent and things like that. They were great for a long time. And then they started having some marital issues. And there was a lot of fighting between them, and they would call me, like each one would call me to just like complain like about the other one. There was one evening that one of them called me and said that her husband had attacked her. He hit her with a lamp. And then he called me and said that she tried to push him in the bathtub. And it just like, it kind of kept getting worse. It kind of came to a head when I'd lived there for a little while. I house hacked these. So I put a pretty nice shed in the back.
Right.
Maybe 3 or 4 years prior to this because I needed it for my tools and stuff. Apparently, he was living in the shed.
Wow.
Yeah, she came home and saw him leaving the shed, and she was mad at him, so she tried to run him over. And he dove out of the way, and she drove through this shed, this like, you know, $1,000 shed that I just put in like 3 years earlier, and it just like exploded. And I got a call from the police about it, and I was like, "That's enough, y'all. We can't." You know, I had to evict them. They did leave like voluntarily, but I was like, I'm going to have to evict you if you don't leave. And then they left voluntarily. That was probably the worst one because that went on for months. It was like, and then they would call me and say, we made up, it's fine. And then it was like another fight like the following month. It was pretty wild.
Well, I know 10 years ago, you lived in the neighborhood
Hmm.
where you had the rentals. And I remember some stories about the neighbors and a little bit of gangbanging going on.
Yeah, we had a bad one with a neighbor. They had dogs that they just left outside all the time, and they would bark constantly, and they were mistreated too, and just really loud music all the time. And then there was like drug trafficking issues. You could see it clearly that they were selling drugs. And then we found out later that there was some elderly abuse going on too, that this was like the grandmother's house, and it was like the grandkids and the nephews and
Yep.
all that stuff coming from, they would get out of incarceration and come and kind of like take advantage of this woman. And that was a bad one. That went on for months. And I did have to get the police involved with that. They already had some investigations going on. Before that, really, we ever got a solution to that, we moved out of that one and we bought another one that we turned into a rental. And it was like a big improvement neighborhood wise. So we didn't really have all those same issues anymore. But I think eventually that there was a resolution there. We didn't live in the house anymore, but the police did finally take care of that.
Yeah, I remember you telling me several times you would just go over there and talk to them, and they would completely reject what you had to say.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
then the police need to get called. So,
Yeah, it was bad.
crazy stuff.
Just all night, you know, it was rough. And there were kids too at that house sometimes, and there was a lot of stuff going on there that they just shouldn't have been part of. So, but you know, that's when you're swimming in certain waters, like that's just
Yeah.
the reality. So if you're gonna invest in real estate in lower income areas, like it's just gonna happen.
Yeah, I mean, it's a sacrifice
Mhm.
that you made to get, to the next level, the next level, the next level. But
Mhm.
that's, what were you, 5,
Yeah.
27, something like that?
Yeah, the first one I bought, I think when I was 24, and then we basically bought one a year for like 4 years.
Yeah.
And then around that time, like the sales and the flips and everything started to increase and get better. So then I could just flat out buy rentals. I didn't need to occupy them anymore because
Right.
I'd have to live in them to put less down to get a better interest rate, you know, all that stuff, and then move
Right.
out. And it got to a point where I didn't have to do that anymore, which was great. So that's the biggest thing with all that is like, you don't have to be special to build a rental portfolio. Like there's so many loan products out there, and there's so much just like stimulus with like FHA, you know, conventional loans. There's all kinds of first time home buyer grant programs, all these things you can take advantage of to start building a real estate portfolio. There's really no reason, you know, if you're of average ability, there's no reason that you shouldn't be able to do this stuff if you're willing to sacrifice.
Yeah. If you're willing to sacrifice and have bad neighbors, maybe,
Mhm.
and take a little risk, but it's a very measured risk. I mean, you have to live somewhere. So why not make it to your advantage?
Mhm.
I love it. And then 10, 12 years later, you're taking a golf trip to Scotland.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, and it's just been making good decisions throughout and not getting over leveraged. That's
Yeah.
been a big one for me.
Yeah.
We know a lot of folks that when you start picking up speed, it's easy to feel like it's unstoppable, you know, and it's not gonna end. And it's easy to bite off more than you can chew. So I just see it as you just take like one success at a time and you just stack them. You don't need to go try to win the whole world at one time. You know, it's just a lot. A lot can go wrong when you do that. So if you just you're really good about goal setting. I do it to a more minor extent than
Mhm.
you do. I really should be better about it. But I give myself sort of arbitrary goals all the time where I'm like, you have
Yeah.
to do this and you have to do that, then you have to do this. And they're not huge goals, but it just keeps you sort of slowly moving, you know, towards the finish line.
Yeah. It's incremental growth. And I was at your house 2 days ago. You have a great house and a great location now. And I have flipped houses all around where you lived before, and it ain't great. I
Mhm.
mean, it was a place to start. And I think a lot of people need to hear that and maybe take a little time and think, I can do this if I'm willing to endure, barking dogs and maybe a little police presence
Mhm.
and, whatever for a period of time. And I remember when you were doing that and your sweet wife endured a
Yeah.
lot through that time, but it's worked out really well because you did the right things in increments and
Yeah.
didn't try to do everything all at once. So
And that's a good
I think
point. I mean,
that's
she sacrificed a lot and she was very patient doing that with me, but now she doesn't have to work a 9 to 5 job that she doesn't want to work,
correct.
you know? So
Right.
it's important if you can get your partner to understand that with you. And there's things that help. I mean, we used to play that cash flow board game a lot.
Oh yeah.
And that helped her to understand, okay, I see what we're doing. We're kind of gamifying everything and it makes it more
Yeah.
understandable.
Yeah, Robert Kiyosaki's cash flow board game it's very cool, and it
Yeah.
really, even when you think you know something, it still opens your mind to possibilities just by playing the game.
Yeah.
It's extremely well designed. For those of you listening or watching, if you haven't heard of Cash Flow by Kiyosaki, it's a great board game to understand real estate investing.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah, that's cool. That's a great tool. So what are you looking forward to?
I feel more stable now with things generally with business. Like I don't have as much financial anxiety as I used to,
Okay.
which is great. It just feels better. And a lot of that too is like from coming through that weird COVID cycle, where for us in real estate, it was like hockey stick growth and then sort of plateau and like a slow slump. Coming from that, I try not to really get too excited about these different trends and go like all too in on things. So I really try to be pretty conservative. Like when commission checks come in or proceeds from a flip or whatever come in, I try to put a pretty decent chunk of that away to the side just to have
Mhm.
reserves. I try to keep about 12 months reserve funds, 12 months of a salary if I needed to aside, because it just makes me sleep better.
Yep.
And it's gotten easier to do that over time, largely because we're not house poor. We haven't bought more house than we should. We haven't bought cars that we shouldn't. We don't, you know, have vacation properties all over the place and things like that. So it's easy to have a little bit more financial security is what it feels like.
But I have a good friend who describes his life as a blend of Dave Ramsey and Robert Kiyosaki. And I think that's really useful because too much of one or the other gets us in trouble.